Welcome to Previously on X-Men, the podcast that looks at X-Men comics, movies, shows, characters, and more. I'm Hilary.
I'm Eric.
And we are talking X-Men 97, back again. This episode is called Fire Made Flesh. Yeah, very good, Eric. This originally aired on March 27, 2024. It was directed by Emi Yanamura and written by Charlie Feldman and Bo DeMaio. So, we've got a previously on for this episode. We catch up on what's been going on with Jean and Cyclops wanting to leave the X-Men.
Jean wants to leave. Cyclops is a big old, but this is all I know.
But it's my responsibility.
Yeah.
We remember the big vision that she had when she was, you know, in Guy Ritchie's mind and like, what's going to happen? And we have Storm leaving and the big surprise with the new Jean bursting in onto the scene.
Right. That's how it ended.
Was there anything new that you noticed in the theme song? I looked, but I didn't see anything jumping out.
Yeah, there were the lyrics where they're like, mutant rights, we gotta fight for the X-Men.
No, that did not happen.
Oh. Well, then I noticed that Magneto was in the intro. Was he in the last one?
I feel like he was, but maybe not. I don't know.
Okay. I guess it makes some sense that Bishop is still in there, but he keeps being very underused. And not only keeps being underused, but is gone next episode.
Yeah. And I feel like I wouldn't necessarily have dinged them on that as much if they hadn't put him in the opening, because it just primes you to be like, oh, cool, he's going to be in this more. And he's just not at all.
Because he's a prominent character when he shows up in the original series. Mm-hmm. He was kind of like the fifth Beatle or something. You know, he wasn't part of the team, but you were familiar enough because he showed up enough.
Yeah, and when he did show up, it was like the episode was about him most of the time.
Yeah, and in this episode, we find out he's just trying to get back to the future. So they only had him here to resolve this episode, really.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, at the very least, they did plant him in earlier episodes with this in mind, but yeah, it's too bad.
And again, Magneto's still in his purple trial Magneto outfit.
Yeah.
They decide to call the new Jean, the Jean who has showed up at their doorsteps, Jean Doe.
Jean Doe. That doesn't last for too long, but it's cute.
No.
That is a morph idea.
Yeah, Morph comes up with that. So, I guess I'll try to get in. I don't know when I'm going to get into what this episode represents for this show.
Well, this I feel like is the first one that really throws a whole bunch at you. Like we've talked in previous episodes about that being a thing about this season, that it feels like they're trying to do a million things all at once, storyline wise and character wise. And I feel like this is the first one that's like, whoa, let's do this and this and this and this and this.
It's so much. And I mean, the fact that it just starts out with the big revelation about Jean's identity in like the first 2 minutes.
Yeah, let's just get that out of the way.
Beast confirms something that I forgot this was the case. In my head, it was the other way around. But the Jean who had showed up at the door, Beast confirms is the real Jean Grey, based off of her age and the amount of rings.
So we have like there's no time for
her tree down.
The amount of rings.
Yeah.
Please don't cut her down. They don't spend any time on this. Like you expect it to be like, there's two of us. Which one is the real one? And like that could be like a season-long mystery. And they're just like, no, okay, we know who it is because of science stuff.
Which means the Jean who was in the last 2 episodes, has been married and had the baby, Nathan, is the clone.
Yes.
So she's the Jean clone.
And it seems like that's the only thing that we know for sure was actually the clone doing it.
Yeah, I'll just refer to her as Madeline because that's easier for me. Not that the show gives me any reason to call her that. Even at the end.
Like a little. It's a tiny little, the little flashback you get.
But yeah, so this Jean who was pregnant and had the baby is the clone, is our Madeline Pryor.
And she does not handle this well, this news.
Well, she handles it quickly because that's what the show does. Like, she just processes like, no, I don't believe it. How dare you? But Scott
she just goes immediately.
Scott instantly makes the wrong move because
just every move with her is wrong that he does.
She says like, right, Scott? And he's like, oh, like he doesn't go like, no, this is Jean. I've been with her. I love her. She's the mother of my, it's just instantly he's like, oh, a clone? Ew.
Yeah. He gets like real weird about it. And I mean, like at the very least, this is a 9-month relationship that he's had with this woman.
So she storms off and regular Jean, original flavor Jean.
Jean.
Yeah, in her little, not a coma, but she's all weak. She's like, I need the X-Men to help me.
Yeah, and she seems like Sinister must have done something and like wiped her memory, which makes things more complicated because now Madeline has all of the memories even before she got dropped into the situation.
Yeah,
and Jean
it's not so
seems
much
to have.
That he took Jean's memory. I mean, she does need to remember things. You're right.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's just we don't know, and according to the show, like all 10 episodes, I don't think it's ever confirmed when the switch happens.
No, I don't think so.
Sometime in the original series, Jean was switched.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I didn't think about that.
My notes seem way too quick, but that's what this episode is. So
it is super quick. It's so quick.
She's up there, and Scott's like, Jean, give me the baby. And she's like, oh, okay, mister, get out.
Yep. And he doesn't really go for it. Like if he's worried about his child with this like imposter person, he doesn't really push.
He doesn't make a single right move. Like, there's no comforting this person. There's no reaching out. There's no acknowledging that the time they spent together was real. There's just like, you are the clone now in my brain. You are categorized as clone.
Yeah. And it would have been interesting to, like, this, he's being a bonehead to begin with, but like it also takes away the character opportunity to like watch him struggle with this. He just doesn't. He just like switches. He's like, not you, her.
Yeah. So this episode does one thing right over the comics, and that in the comics, Scott was married to Madeline Pryor and had a baby with her, but then he just upped and left them both to go join X Factor because the original Jean was back alive. So this wasn't he thinks Madeline is a clone situation in the comics. He just left his wife for his old girlfriend and his college buddies, basically. And, you know, then they had to, in the comics, they had to turn Madeline into a villain, basically, to somehow, you know, course correct Cyclops, though it never really takes.
Yeah.
Because it's always there anyway. So this episode, I think, fixes that a little bit.
Well, it's not quite as dire on his part. Like, he's not being quite as awful.
Because the clone stuff is happening and because she becomes her Goblin Queen Ness.
Just right out of the gate, man.
Yeah. It means Cyclops gets to make the same choices he did in the comics, but they seem more forgivable.
Yeah.
You know?
Like, as long as you don't really think about it too much.
Yeah. On the other hand, in the comics, Madeline Pryor, Inferno, and Limbo and stuff, and the Nathan getting infected with the, like, that's all, it's not the whole 80s, but it's a lot of the 80s.
Yeah.
You know, it's at least half a decade of
you wonder
stories
why
in the comics.
Why do you think they decided to cram all of that together?
Know. Again, maybe they thought they'd only get the one season and they were going to have to do everything. Or
well, then just choose something, man. Like, this is too much.
It's crazy that Inferno gets just this one Inferno could be a whole season. And we'll go on later that certain episodes and plot lines coming up could have been whole seasons. But yes, Inferno is like a big event in the comics, and it's the result of a bunch of stories that had come before. Anyway, Madeline, clone Jean, hears a creepy voice on a baby monitor.
From the baby monitor, yeah, which is... Do you think it was actually on the baby monitor, or do you think this is like a subliminal kind of a thing?
I don't know. Have you ever not been creeped out by a baby monitor?
Oh, they're the worst.
They're the
When I had to
creepiest
have one for
thing.
my... Yeah! When I had to have one for my baby, I was like, oh, I don't want to. And I almost wanted to get one of the video ones, and I could not.
Yep.
Like, just do not get a video one.
They're so scary. But yeah, we don't know. I don't think he's there in the monitor or in person at all. I think it's all in her head.
In her mind. Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
sense. Because he appears sort of, so you really
Yeah.
like, nail down, like, oh yeah, this guy.
Yeah, and luckily Beast clarifies for us in case you don't know, but it's Mr. Sinister.
Yes.
He's back,
Mr.
Hilary.
Sinister. He's back. And it's a pretty classic storyline for him. He replaced her with a clone so that he could get her to have a baby with Cyclops, because just like mixing their genes was not working. So he just did it the natural way. Good for him.
Yeah. In the comics, he constantly refers to Madeline as a brood mare.
Oh God. Oh, that's
Hey.
awful.
Chris Britton, the original voice of Mr. Sinister from the old animated series, is back as
He's
this
back,
Mr. Sinister.
baby.
It
Nice.
took me a second because they really, modulate or do whatever that effect is to his voice.
Yeah.
That kind of weird biomechanical
Digitally,
sound.
kind of. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it took me the first time I watched this, about half the episode, like, no, that is the original guy.
Yeah.
But it's great because he sounds great. Here's stuff I like about Mr. Sinister throughout this whole show, is that he was an evil guy in the original series, but he still had to be like Saturday cartoon evil.
Yeah.
And this Sinister is, but he gets to just be like super evil.
Yeah. He can just lean in.
Like this, this is, later there's a horrible line in another episode where you're like, wow, this Sinister is awful. But, this one is just, creepy and evil. It's interesting because this is coming after the Krakoa era, so they didn't decide to lean in on that
Yeah.
goofy, extravagant Mr.
Yeah.
Sinister.
That would have been an interesting turn.
Yeah, I wonder if in later ones. But this one is very much the same Sinister and that made me happy because I do like the new, I love capes and making a show. Sinister, he's a lot of fun, but I also love the just popping out of shadows and going, genetics.
Yeah. It fits with the previous series, so it makes sense.
Anyway, as soon as he shows up, she just goes crazy and says they're gonna feel my inferno.
Yeah, she goes completely bananas. And he seems to have, triggered some psychic thing that he must have, implanted in her. And she just kind of, cracks.
He says, I control your mind. So I don't know if we are supposed to take everything she does as her own decision or what. But you're right. She just cracks and she completely changes her outfit. She gets green energy.
It's like a switch is flipped. She even has a different personality now. It doesn't really feel like what would happen to Jean.
She becomes very vampy, instantly.
Yeah. And it doesn't feel like a natural reaction that someone would have under stress or something. This is just a different
true.
person.
Beast warns the X-Men about what is happening because he realizes the genetic makeup. He says that all genetic scientists have their own style that you can notice the same way their own style, and so he recognizes it as Mr. Sinister. And so the X-Men are like, oh no, but not all the X-Men, because Gambit, Logan, and Morph are leaving the Danger Room.
Yep, they've just been having a session or whatever, and they go to schedule another session, and Morph finds that Rogue and Magneto have scheduled quite far out.
A lot of time.
A lot of sessions.
It's funny the way it's funny the way Morph looks at Gambit as they just press the button. They have that smile, and even Wolverine's like, that's pretty funny. But Gambit's like, maybe I'll go find Rogue.
Yep.
Morph seems sad because Logan's gonna go check on Jean, and he tells Morph to go hit the shower. So Morph does, and they see that Logan's in there by himself.
But like in kind of a spooky vibe.
Yeah.
Like we can see that
Morph doesn't
something
pick
weird
up on
is
that.
happening. Yeah, they
Morph
don't do that.
transforms, not into Wolverine, but transforms the claws and is like, do you need help with those hard to reach places? And I think we see it later in another episode, but I think now we're to assume that Morph has some romantic feelings towards Wolverine.
Yes, that seems to be something, because we're beginning now is a sequence of kind of hallucinations, I guess, by
The haunted
Madeline.
house stuff, yeah.
Yeah, and so what they're doing is having like the different things that like would haunt the different characters, which is always a fun thing. And this seems to be the start of Morphs, that this fake Wolverine kind of taunts them about.
Yeah.
We all know what's going on and stuff.
Yep. And then the Wolverine starts melting and gets all gross. And Gambit goes to Rogue and finds jungle, like Savage Land, Rogue and Magneto just pressed up against each other, their skins melting into each other, and not
it's
I didn't
so
mean
gross.
that romantically, like it's physically they're
it's
melting
all
into
like
each
goopy.
other. And it's pretty funny because when Gambit leaves that, he's like, that's something Gambit can't unsee.
Yeah. He doesn't seem that disturbed. He's just sort of like, that was gross.
Yeah, the furniture starts coming alive and everything, and Morph realizes what's happening. He realizes Sinister's there because he's like, not you, and freaks out because Morph was killed, brought back to life by Sinister, and then mind controlled.
Yeah, and that gets a nice amount of play in this episode, that they're like the aficionado.
Morph still
Sinister.
has a lot of PTSD about Mr. Sinister. I like that the furniture is the stuff that's coming alive, because that is a thing. Like, it's all these inanimate objects in the comics that come alive, like the elevators come alive and everything.
This is some heavy anime imagery that starts to happen in here. Like, you've got some like Miyazaki horror vibes, and you've got kind of like an Akira situation.
When Beast opens the elevator, and it's just that does Spirited Away moment. He's like, one of us is on the wrong floor.
Yeah. I didn't want my son to watch it because it was just like weird, creepy.
I love the moment when they're all together and they're like, this is, and or whatnot. Or basically somebody says, what's happening? And Morph is like, can't you tell? We're in hell. And then the ground opens up and they fall, like, camera behind them into limbo. I like that moment. The first time I saw that, I was like, all right.
Yeah, I thought this was a creative way to kind of like nod to the whole limbo hell situation.
Yeah.
While letting it be a more of like a brief visit kind of a thing. Because like in this, it's more, the hallucination and her putting them in this situation.
The limbo hell stuff is really just action sequence stuff. It's like there's nothing, like if you want to see Cyclops charge Bishop up and then Bishop blows everything up, that's fun. You get the moments of them all flying around and fighting, but then a demon sentinel shows up, but is stopped by Madeline, who...
No, it's not Madeline, it's Jean.
Oh, right. You know what? They're clones, so I couldn't remember. You're right. Jean shows up as like an angel.
Yeah, she's all white energy. She's in her little hospital gown and stuff.
You just remember Jean's voice saying stop.
But then she immediately collapses, as one does when using your power.
Jean's back to collapsing.
And then Goblin Queen introduces herself.
Yeah, which doesn't really work when you're not doing Limbo and Inferno, because she's the Goblin Queen. It's like, well...
Like, why?
Of what goblins? Where are the goblins?
Yeah, it's a very weird... like, if you know kind of situation. Like, you just have to be like, oh yeah, because she's the Goblin Queen, right? But like, if you didn't know that, what is that experience? Like, why?
This is the first of 2 times in this episode she will name herself apropos of nothing.
Yeah.
So here she is, the Goblin Queen, the most cleavage that has ever been in any of the X-Men episodes. Maybe I remember we talked about that Death Strike episode when they were in the sewers and how the animation had to something because the original animation was too bouncy, as it were, for Lady Deathstrike. But this is definitely the most like approved by the censors.
It's very
Cleavage.
vavoom. Yeah.
This show, and like they're not, shy about it either. And I think it just kind of hammers home we're targeting the adults from who grew up in the 90s. We're not looking any kids we get watching the show is, an added plus, but we are targeting people who were watching the 90s show in the 90s and are now adults. And I mean, it's not like a mission statement there, but it's just like another visual reminder that this show has a different target in mind.
Yeah. The people who like boobs.
But like you said, yeah, they're just trying to get people who like boobs. But it's like you said as well, like she's also very vampy and stuff. And I can't think of another character from the 90s who played as vampy as this Goblin Queen Jean does.
She outvamps Emma. I think you're right about that.
Yeah, they didn't play Emma very vampy. You're right. The Hellfire Club, they had those like old corset styles, but they were also like, not as fleshy as the original comic ones were.
Not quite as fleshy, yep.
I don't know. Anyway.
She and her boobs take Nathan and get out of there.
Yeah, she takes Nathan and leaves. She seems to be enjoying herself. She's laughing a lot, making fun of them.
Yeah.
It's her psychic powers, but it's very magic-y.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Anyway, we cut to Mr. Sinister has baby Nathan, and...
He puts him in a green vat.
A green vat, and so...
Like, fully, submerged.
Yeah. Apocalypse in the comic was the one that infected Nathan/Cable with the technogranic virus, but here it is Mr. Sinister, and he's doing it so this baby will be immortal. Or invincible, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't know if this is like stage 1, and then he was gonna do something else, because it's not immediately apparent how this would be helpful.
Yeah, I mean, in the comics, the whole thing was that Sinister wanted to defeat Apocalypse, so he chased the bloodline of Scott and Jean to make Nathan so that he could be a weapon against Apocalypse. Madeline, Goblin Queen, shows up at this place. It's an old rundown area. Morph apparently knew where this was. They say they know where they're going. They can control your mind. It's not really up to Jean at this point, and they transform into their old self from the 90s cartoon.
Yeah, that was a nice little nod.
And it's with the, like, those shadows under the eyes, so that we remember it's the transformed Morph.
Yes. Ah! That was my Morph.
So they get there, and Morph transforms into magic.
Yeah. Yeah, which I looked away for a split second, and then I looked back, and I was like, it's Ileana! And then I was like, oh, right. I feel like that happens every time there's a Morph does anything. I'm just like, oh, it's that character! Oh, no, it's not.
Morph, as Ileana says, don't want to hurt you, and Goblin Queen says, I don't want to fight you either, and I want you to fight for me, and controls Morph as Ileana, and Morph transforms into Darkchild, the evil version of magic.
So it's a fun little thing to get to see.
Is part of Inferno as well. Yeah, it's the way they get magic / Darkchild into the Inferno thing without actually having the character there. Also, I haven't mentioned them because they don't really do anything, but Jubilee and Sunspot were watching a movie together when everything went crazy, and part of me thought it was New Mutants because the girl on the TV also looked like Ileana.
Oh, that would be funny. Well, the thing I liked about that moment was you see how everybody's getting haunted by things, and even Roberto is haunted by his mom. But like Jubilee just sort of seems unaffected by the entire thing.
She's used to it.
She has no demons in her closet.
She's very adaptable.
Yep.
Jean, original Pepsi flavor Jean, is back. Beast is keeping her in the med area, and Wolverine is there as well. They keep all leaving, but leaving Wolverine there. It's like, does Cyclops not get it?
He does get it. It's a power thing.
Okay.
Here, nurse my wife.
Yeah, maybe. It's interesting that they keep going to do fights, and they keep leaving their fighter.
Yeah, that's true.
But Jean says, I need to help them. Though Wolverine brings her back by telling her to focus on his mind. I don't know why, but
no one else has thought to do this.
But doing that helps Jean remember who she is. And then he's like, keep going. And she's like, I mean that much to you? And he says, even more than that. And it's like, ugh, here we are.
Yep.
Luckily now, there's a Jean for everybody.
Yeah, everybody you get a Jean and you get a Jean.
You guys don't have to do a love triangle when everybody has a Jean.
Yeah.
Madeline is taking Magneto to task. Magneto's, throwing metal and stuff, and
I thought the stuff that Magneto did was so cool because there was stained glass everywhere, and he uses the lead or whatever that holds the stained glass together, and so he's shattering all the windows, and then she takes all the shards that he made and just turns them against him. It's a pretty cool sequence.
And he starts getting cut up and everything. Mm-hmm. So then Jean, back home, uses her mind to snap out Madeline by going through their memories together, like when they first got their powers, which was when their best friend
Madeline
got hit by a car and died.
They say Maddie.
Yeah.
So there is at least a little seed. Not enough, but it's there.
Oh. I did not pick up on that.
Oh, yes.
Oh, okay. Well, yeesh. And then they remember having Nathan, and that snaps Madeline out because she's like, wait a second, my child, we need to go help him.
Because motherhood is the strongest emotion.
Strongest force in all the universe.
Aww.
We could just combine motherhood with gravity. We could travel.
It'd be amazing.
She was beating up Scott. She was telling him that he was going to bleed and everything. But now she's like, let's go get our kid. And Scott is like, okay, cool. Now we're a couple again or something. I don't know.
They're a team now. And so they just go and Scott immediately blasts the vat.
Yeah,
that
no
Nathan
question,
is in.
no back off, Sinister. It's just blam. And he does that gross green gooey stuff around his body when he gets shot by Scott. It's extra gross now.
Because of grown-ups.
They get Nathan out of the vat of green. He's like, you fools, you've doomed the child.
And it seems they have.
Basically say, leave my child alone. And Sinister says, Ladybird, fly away home. And I was like, okay.
And he just
and
backs away.
Into the shadow.
Into the shadows.
Yeah.
Not interested in fighting, I guess.
No, I would. Oh, we didn't say Bishop was did by his sister?
Yeah, just briefly. I guess just because he left her behind, I guess? I don't know.
The future Shard. Yeah, Shard is there saying, where are you from? When's your time? Who are you?
Yeah.
And he instantly is like, you're not real. Whereas everybody else is like, Mom, no.
Why are you melting? And here in this place.
They get back to the mansion and the lab, and Beast confirms there's some kind of techno-organic virus, but because they interrupted it, it didn't fully take, but now it's taking over him completely, and he needs months or years to create a cure, and this thing is gonna, be done very quickly. And I don't remember, is it Jean or Clone Jean that suggests
it's
maybe
Jean.
In the future?
I think for a minute here, we don't see Clone Jean for a little bit. But yeah, Jean is pretty quick to think of this idea. She's like, so not now, but maybe in the future.
Yeah, she's like, not quite ready to be a mom myself here. So let's.
So they decide that they're going to send Nathan with Bishop into the future.
Because Bishop says he knows somebody who can make anything, and we know he's talking about Forge, because Forge is interesting in the series, in the original series, because he is in Bishop's future, but we also see Forge multiple times in the present. So
yeah.
However far away Bishop is, Forge keeps going. And in this show, Bishop has not met present-day Forge.
Right.
And the X-Men have a couple of times, but yeah, we the audience are supposed to know who Bishop is talking about. And so he's going to take Nathan to the future, take care of this organic virus. And Scott does this whole thing like, no, I won't abandon my child. I'm not going to be like my father. none of you know, do any of you know what it's like to sacrifice something? And they're like, Scott. And it seems like, okay, Scott's doing pretty good. It's a pretty emotional comic issue, even though you can see the editorial writing on the wall when Scott in the comics has to send his son. And it feels like this is doing a little bit better until he says, I won't be a part of this.
I won't be a part of
walks
this.
Out.
Yes, it's a whole big thing about abandoning his child, and then he just abandons his child, and there's no irony.
Him completely now. It's great. Why can't people just get the idea that Scott will have to send his child to the future without making? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's a bad moment. It is real bad.
So now Madeline is basically having to single mother this situation.
Mm-hmm. Maybe it is Madeline the whole time. I've been saying it was Jean, but it is Madeline because she's the mother.
Madeline's out there psychically talking to baby Nathan, imparting her love and all this other stuff to him and everything. And then Bishop takes him away and Scott's not there. And Madeline is now leaving. And Jean's like, you can stay here. She's like, no, I got to go be my own person. Call me Madeline Pryor.
I know. I love that it's not even just Madeline. It's Madeline Pryor. It's not Maddie.
It's Madeline Pryor. And it just, again, it's like, but what?
Yeah, like if you didn't know, I want to know that experience. Like, what are just like new viewers just being like, what? Why? Why would you call her that?
Yeah.
Anyway. It's a nice moment because I like how Madeline says to Jean, like, you have my memories, like, you know that we want to leave, so I'm just gonna go. You can just stay here.
And it's nice because in the comics, again, they turned Madeline into a villain. Like, she becomes the Goblin Queen, and there's a big psychic battle between her and Jean, and Madeline basically dies, and you know, that's it for Madeline for a long time. But that's like the Chris Claremont's having to wrap things up in ways he didn't want to. And it also always creates an adversarial relationship between Jean and Madeline whenever they show up in the comics. Here, they're much more understanding of each other. And Madeline's not a villain. Jean doesn't hate Madeline. Madeline doesn't even seem to really hate Jean.
Yeah.
Just doesn't want to be under the same roof.
Yeah, which makes perfect sense. There's nothing holding her there anymore. I mean, she sent her son into the future. She doesn't want to be with Scott. He's being a jerk to her. So, just go live your life.
And then we have a moment where Jean goes back into the mansion and her and Scott just stand there looking at each other and they don't say anything. And
that was so
their
good.
Scene ends.
That was such a good, because and the whole, their bedroom is all in disarray too from like the whole hell thing. And so they're just like far apart, just looking at each other. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah. The episode then cuts to, man, what is they talking about on the news? I don't even remember.
Oh, I wasn't paying attention to that. It's some bar.
We're at a bar. Storm's there, dressed in her 80s mohawk look.
She's looking cool.
Drinking a beer alone, and somebody comes up and says, like, too bad about the weather. If only somebody could make it rain. And she's like, speak plainly! Who are you? And we're introduced to Forge.
It's Forge!
Forge is a new voice actor for 97. It's Gil Birmingham, who is probably best known as Billy Black, Jacob's dad in the Twilight movies.
Do you think that's how he's best known?
I mean, he plays, he's in Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. He was in Wind River.
He's in Yellowstone.
Is he in Yellowstone?
Yeah, he's Thomas Rainwater in Yellowstone.
Oh, for
I guess
50
he's just
episodes.
one of those. I guess he's just one of those guys that pops up places. I think he's been in a bunch, but yeah, he's cool as Forge. I like it.
At this point, yes, you're probably right that more people know him for Yellowstone. But for a long time, I think more eyes saw him in the Twilight movies.
You're right.
But yeah, so he is now the voice of Forge.
And he's just offering to help Storm.
He says he's an old friend of Professor Xavier, and he wants to help get her powers back, which is awfully quick, considering she lost her powers last episode, and we haven't seen her have to live without her powers for like a second, unless you count this bar scene.
Yeah, that was kind of a shame to get right back on the horse there.
To go back to the Madeline and Limbo Inferno stuff, like Storm didn't have her powers in the comics for a good amount of time. It felt like, again, half the decade. Like she was still in charge of the X-Men. She just didn't have her powers.
Yeah.
And this show just can't resolve its own plot threads fast enough. Like, this isn't it trying to wrap up plot threads that the old show has. This is plot threads the show introduces
it just
at
brings
the beginning
them in.
of an episode.
Yeah.
And, that's fine. And, the 90s cartoon had to do the same thing because it was episodic a lot of times.
Mm-hmm. But these are like huge, far-reaching storylines.
Yeah, it's what it's doing. Yeah, it's the size of the stories that it's doing in just these one episodes. And in the 90s series, I mentioned some of the 2 or 4-parters, like they felt like they went on an episode too long.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that was also because it was a Saturday morning cartoon. Whereas this, it just seems like they have the time and the resources that they could do some of these stories longer. But this is just...
I would have just picked 1 or 2 and just been like, we're going to focus on these things for this season. But
I mean, Magneto's supposed to be leading the X-Men, right? That was like confirmed in the 2nd episode. He did the trial. The X-Men were like, well, now we accept you. He's barely in this episode as a leader. He's not in the next episode. It's just a very high concept but messy series in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I think that it's really fun, and the things that are done well are done so well. And I think that kind of heightens the frustration with how messy it is, because you think, like, if they had just narrowed their focus a little bit, what could we have accomplished, But oh well.
Yeah.
We have what we have. Maybe they'll chill out. If they come back for the next one, maybe they'll chill out a little bit and they won't be so panicky to get everything in the universe into it.
Yeah. Like that stuff with Limbo where, he's like, we're in hell and the ground opened up. It feels like a roller coaster ride, but in a good way.
Yeah.
But then when you get to when you're doing that to the character stuff, that's when it starts to get very whiplash.
Yes.
Like, again, Madeline went from, I'm Jean, I'm the Goblin Queen, I'm back to being me, now I'm Madeline, in 22 minutes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She went through a lot, and it's just a lot to do very quickly.
Yeah.
Who was it? They closed in on some... It was Madeline when she was in Goblin Queen form. They, did a close-up of her mouth while she was saying, I'm the Goblin Queen now. And I feel like this animation is not... I like this animation for some of the things it does. It looks great during the action sequences. It's not do a close-up of their mouth moving.
You know what I liked about that, though?
What?
It happens because Cyclops blasts her or something. She gets blood on her lip and she wipes it off. And when she wipes it off, she wipes off her dark lipstick. And I thought that was a fun move. And then it's just lip color, and then her top lip is all purple.
He starts blasting. He just starts attacking his wife with his powers so fast.
I know, and he's like, I'm sorry. And I'm like, you just went there. You had no hesitation.
Yeah. Clone! She's a clone! Clone!
She's a clone. Who cares? Clones aren't even human, right? Or whatever. Anyway.
I will say, as much as I had an issue with the Inferno done.
Mm-hmm.
I did, while watching this the first time, I was like, okay, now I think I'm on board now, because now I see that the show is going to start, they went through it too fast, but at the same time, Inferno's a story we never covered in the original series.
They're going for it, and that is interesting to see. Mm-hmm. Did you like the episode? Was it good enough to balance the fastness?
I like it because its atmosphere is pretty on point.
Yeah, I agree.
During the spookier stuff, and then even when they're at Sinister's place with the stained glass, it has kind of a Halloween vibe to it all. I think, as an overarching thing, it bums me out, but as a entertaining, however long this episode is, minutes-wise, it does a good job.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And I think those first 2 episodes were very old viewer, but not comic fan friendly ways to bring people back. And I feel like this episode is kind of like, all right, but now we're going deep and we're going all in.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a nice like indicator of what's to come.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the thing with the show. There's lots to like, and there's also a lot to be like, but why?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It is. It's a polarizing kind of a thing, and not polarizing like you like it and I don't like it. It's polarizing within the individual.
Yeah. It's polarizing like Lorna Dane.
Like Lorna Dane.
Yeah.
Polaris. All right. So next time we're going to be talking about Motendo and Life Death, Part 1.
Yeah.
So I guess it is a 2-parter somehow.
It's like how Beavis and Butthead have this is the first 15-minute story that's not connected to anything, and here's the second 15-minute story that's not connected to anything.
Yeah.
They got their influence from Beavis and Butthead on the next episode.
Naturally. It's just a perfect match.
Actually, considering who shows up in Montendo, it's not too far to say it's not Beavis and Butthead related.
Really, they could have gone further to connect that.
Man, what would Beavis and Butthead say if they were watching this show? Whoa, Gene got hot.
Oh no. I'm pulling the plug on this. No. Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay. Thank you to Prophetic Music for our theme song. Previously on X-Men is brought to you by the Radio Meanwhile Network. Other shows on the network include This and Dorian Life, 90s Music Got Me Like, and 9021 Here We Go. Follow us on Facebook, and be sure to follow the network on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads for info on all our shows. Please rate, subscribe, or share the show wherever you get your podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.